seem to be prospect of a ceasefire or any sort of deal in the offing at the moment.
John, for the moment, thank you very much. John Donnison in Jerusalem. Let's speak to Yaakov Katz, who's a former editor of the Jerusalem Post and senior fellow at the Jewish People Policy Institute. Mr. Katz, thank you very much for joining us here on BBC News. We appreciate you taking time out of your day. The EU's top diplomat, as we've been reporting, has called this rescue mission another massacre of Gazans. How much difference will that make, do you believe, to the Netanyahu government?
I don't think it makes much difference, Martine, and I think that Joseph Borrell's comments are absurd and a moral disgrace because, on the one hand, he should be asking, why are Israeli hostages being held in civilian homes? Why are there apartments where people were taken against their will in the greatest Hamas massacre, the greatest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust on October 7th, have been held there for the last 8 months? Did he think that people can just be taken and then Israel just shows up and knocks on the door and says, hi, can we have Noah, Shlomi, Andre back? Does he think that that's the way it works, that you just show up and you ask for your people and they're handed over? Israel came in, fought to get its people, and on the way out was attacked ferociously by hundreds of Hamas fighters.
But Mr. Katz, we can be... These situations are not an either-or, are they? We can abhor the killing of Israelis at the Nova Music Festival, and we can also abhor the deaths of civilians in an operation like this. I mean, what would you call the deaths of those civilians? The number is disputed, I admit, but it looks like it's at least 100 casualties, even according to the lowest estimates by Israel.
I think that it actually is sometimes an either or, and I think that the deaths of these civilians their blood is on the hands of Hamas, right, for holding civilians Israeli civilians in a civilian neighborhood, in civilian apartments. You have to wonder why they do this. And the reason it is an either or, Martine, is because the reason that Hamas uses this tactic, they want someone like Joseph Borrell to then accuse Israel of a massacre. This emboldens Hamas. This basically shows Hamas that its tactics work because they can take people, steal them away from their country, murder, massacre, and rape, keep people hostages for 8 months, and then the High Representative of the European Union calls what Israel does, what any country would do, Britain, America, France, anyone, to rescue their people, calls it a massacre.
But it doesn't.
So if you are the leaders of Hamas, you say to yourself, this is great, this works, we should keep doing this.
Well, I think many people would say that it's not working, is it? Because the situation in Gaza is deteriorating. The casualties couldn't even be treated because they don't have even the most basic of drugs and medical equipment to help them. And how much does this further endanger the 116 hostages who are still in Gaza, 40 of whom may sadly not be alive anymore, of course, but the rest are?
But I'm afraid you're wrong when you say it's not working. It's not working for the Palestinian civilians of Gaza. That's true. But it is working for the Hamas leaders of Gaza who continue to remain in tunnels, feeling that they have immunity and emboldened because of comments like Joseph Borrell and reporting that is done around the world of an alleged massacre that Israel never carried out in the Gaza Strip.
You say it's not an either-or situation. However, the IDF does have responsibility to minimise civilian casualties, and yet we've seen, Mr. Katz, and yet we've well, this has clearly not happened in this case, is it? Tell us about the considerations the IDF would have had to have made. Normally, it's very rare for hostages to be released. Talk us through, if you can, the operation, as far as you understand it, how it will have been carried out in daylight.
Well, first of all, you want to gather intelligence to know the location of where these hostages are being held. Gather as much information as you can about the location, who's there, who lives there, who's in the apartments nearby, how many guards are inside the apartments, what's the layout of the apartments, what's the room where the hostages might be held inside there. Then you're going to want to send your forces in covertly, discreetly, with the element of surprise, which again, I push back on people who say, yes, the IDF has done a great job until now giving notice, but to other places in Gaza. But when you're going in an operation like this, you need to retain the element of surprise. There is no such thing as giving warning, as I've heard that other people have asked in the past. There is no warning to give. And then once you go in, once you breach the apartment, assuming you've made it there discreetly, as the IDF did yesterday, The moment you break through that front door, that's when everyone will know you're there. And that's when speed is imperative and is important, and you have the opportunity for mistakes. We know, for example, that Arnon Zamora, who was a top elite officer, was part of that breach force into the apartment where the 3 men were held, because there were 2 apartments. He was killed in that operation. So there's a lot of danger also. You're not going to send troops in and lose more soldiers than the hostages that you can retrieve. So there's a lot of elements here. And of course, Martinez, how do you get out of there?
Finally,
once you've gotten in, you have to also be able to extricate your forces in the most secure and safest way possible.
Finally, and briefly, if you would, how does the outcome of this mission, in which 4 hostages were safely released back into back to their families, increase the chances or lessen the chances of some sort of ceasefire deal, which was also meant to facilitate the release of the remaining hostages in Gaza? Just briefly.
Yeah, well, President Biden had put forward that deal, which Hamas has yet to respond to. So we're all waiting with anticipation to see what the response will be. But I hope and pray, Martine, that after we saw the release yesterday of these 4 hostages, great celebration here in Israel, this will push the government here in Israel and hopefully also push Hamas in Gaza to understand that the best way forward is a deal that will see the release of the remaining hostages and bring an end to this war.
Yaakov Katz from the Jewish People Policy Institute, thank you very much for your time today.